what in heaven's name brought you to Casablanca?
My health. I came to Casablanca for the waters.
The waters? What waters? We're in the desert.
I was misinformed.
He taught me, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
The ability to speak does not make you intelligent.
You're tearing me apart!
What?
You say one thing, he says another, and everybody changes back again!
It's the Al Travis Show, and we absolutely love having our next guest in. He's AErich Mische with S.A.V.E, Suicide Awareness Voices of Education. Try to get him in here at least once a month so we can chat about what they're up to, because they're up to a lot of stuff. It's all good. AErich, thank you for being here. I would like to go back, because when folks do their job and do it well, I think it should be highlighted. You came on, I don't know, maybe it was a year ago now, I don't remember, and you were talking about a bridge that needed safety nets, for lack of a better term. And even now, just get temporary ones, and then let's get to the point where we can put, the real ones, build them into architecture. And I love the idea. I was like, that just makes sense to me when you said it, why we didn't. You went after this, you and the S.A.V.E group, and you had a success with that. That bridge now is going to be getting a temporary one for now, but you're going to get real ones, right? Congratulations. That's how this thing works. That's how you work. That's why I like having you on the show.
Well, I appreciate that, and you also helped play a role in that because you helped us get the word out. And so, right here behind me, this sign, Kayla's Hope, right? That was this whole project was started because Kayla's mom lost her on this bridge, and Kayla's mom came up and said, I want to protect other parents' kids, right? So it started. I mean, that's one of the things that people always have to remember about nonprofits in this country, Al, is that most nonprofits that start in this country start because there's been somebody who was personally impacted.
Yeah.
Right. So, the organization that I used to lead, right, Spare Key, the group that I went down in the raft on, that was an organization that had started almost 30 years ago because a family, Rob and Patsy Keach, had lost their son to heart disease. He was a young baby, right? And in the process, they almost lost their home because all the bills added up. Well, they started that group because they didn't want any other family to deal with that hardship, right? So the same thing with Kayla's Hope and these barriers on the bridges, and the same thing with S.A.V.E. S.A.V.E was started 36 years ago by a group of family members who lost someone to suicide. And 36 years ago, nobody talked about suicide. And there was no organization out there helping families to deal with it and try to get resources. And 36 years later, this is their legacy, right? We're here helping to save lives by putting barriers on bridges, working to save lives by focusing on protections for kids on social media platforms, all sorts of things. So, we're grateful for the work that we get to do, and grateful for the opportunity to talk about it here.
Let me ask you this. You'd bring up, people didn't talk about it 36 years ago. And I'm an old man, so I can say back in my day, we did not talk about it because the brilliance, and I don't know if there's ever a study on it, if you talked about it, you'd have copycats, and that would now, I presume it's 36 years we've studied this and said, wow, that is like just junk science. Why did we ever start doing it? Right? It's better to talk about it now. Where are we at? Is there a study on this?
I will tell you that, it's human nature, really, Al, right? Yeah. Human nature is we figure that if we say something about something bad, right, something bad's going to happen. Yeah. And so I think, the conventional wisdom was if you talked about suicide, you're going to plant the idea in somebody's head. Yeah. What we now know is that if you don't talk about it, you don't give yourself an opportunity to try to help that individual who's probably already thinking about it, right? So the key here is talking about it gives you the opportunity to get out there and impact it, right? Try to intervene in some meaningful way. As a kid, I'll also be very candid about this. I grew up in a household where domestic violence was a real thing, right? And in my parents' generation, you didn't talk about things that went on inside.
What goes in the house stays in the house,
right?
Absolutely.
Stays in the house, and my dad would say that, right? And I love my dad, right? My dad's been gone for a long time, but my dad suffered from mental illness, right? And that mental illness manifested itself in some really horrible things, right? But the one thing, he'd always say, don't talk about what goes on in this house. And you'd be like, okay, right?
Yeah.
Well, guess what?
Understand.
When we started talking about domestic violence,
Mhm.
right, we started dealing with it, right? We started
Yeah, absolutely.
saving women and children's lives because we talked about it, right? Suicide's not any different. If you don't talk about it, if you don't bring it out of the darkness, you can't
Then
save people.
But it's like the bridge thing, sir. We start chatting about it. I have no doubt that for 100 years or however long we've been, maybe 2,000 years they've been putting bridges up, people have been making bad decisions using bridges in bad ways, right? There have been suicide on bridges. So this isn't new, the idea that happened. So my point being is, it seems like such a strange new idea to put these guards up to save people from doing that. And I presume the thought process 36 years ago, well, if we put guards up, people will think about it. And then, it's like, wait a minute. We already know, what I'm saying? Is that the reason? Even architecturally, we were hiding ourselves from the fact that people have been doing this for 2,000 years?
Yeah, I think the frustrating thing is, Al, I'll just be very candid, is
Sure.
you still have that mindset with a lot of folks, right? I will tell you that we received significant criticism, and I won't go into who.
Understand.
Right? From folks that were angry that we were talking about this, and they're like, how dare you talking about this, saying it out loud is going to encourage people to do this. And my response, I'll be very candid. My response was, you've known for 50 years, you've known for 25 years that this danger existed, and you were more concerned about not talking about it than you were about doing something about it. Right. And so, right. So in the meantime, while you were holding yourself up as kind of this, we're following the rules, people were dying.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, I may be old, but I don't subscribe to this idea that you should not speak about the harms that we face in this life.
I'm not smiling because you're saying anything funny. I'm smiling because I'm living your life. What I'm talking about is, since we decided to have you on monthly, right? People come in, why would you do that every month? What can you honestly say about it's like, well, if you're not talking about it, it goes away. It's back in the dark. We got to do it. And I appreciate you coming on. Even these fine radio stations that carry us, really? You're going to do a half an hour every month on this? Said, if not us, who? And then they stop. I mean, if you push back a little bit, they'll stop. But there is that pushback. It is still, of all the things that you talk about, spousal abuse, domestic abuse, that isn't as taboo right now as suicide.
Yeah,
the word.
I mean,
so
but I guarantee you, your partners, your radio partners, right?
Yeah,
there will be a day when they're walking down the street, and there will be a listener who will come up to them and say, "I want to thank you for that conversation that you allowed on the air. I want to thank you for telling people about 988." Right? Yep. That you can call, you can text it, that it's free, 24 hours, that anybody who needs help can call it or text it. Yep. Right? And when they get that conversation, Al, somebody's going to call you up and say, you know what, Al, thank you.
Well, and no one's been mean about it. It's been questioned because I don't know that there's a whole lot of us in the radio business that are doing a half hour a month on strictly this topic. I'm good with it. I want to help any way we can. 988, if any of this conversation makes you feel a little strange, a little queasy, you want to talk to somebody, you want to text somebody, 988. I got to go to break. When we come back, can we find out what you're doing this week? Because you always got something going on.
Plus, I need some help voting on these shoes.
Ooh, get on YouTube, take a look at is the vote whether you wear them or not? Because I'm going to vote, you don't have to wear them. We'll be back
to that.
If you could save a life, would it be worth 60 minutes of your time? S.A.V.E, Suicide Awareness Voices of Education, wants you to know that you can save a life. The One Step Ahead online suicide prevention training teaches you the 4 easy steps to talking to a friend, coworker, or family member about suicide and how you can give them the help they need. Best of all, the training is free. To sign up and take the training, go to save.org/one-step-ahead. That's save.org/one-step-ahead.
There are many ways to explore Alexandria. Some like to experience the outdoors and all the fun winter in Minnesota can provide. Pick your favorite way to get in touch with nature. Others like to explore downtown in the warm comfort of a boutique or gathered around a table with friends. You can do all of that or relax and do nothing at all. Come explore Alexandria. Start planning at explorealex.com.
If it's your turn to host a game, Grandpa's Barbecue suggests you try something different. Put out the perfect barbecue flavor of Grandpa's Barbecue. Add it to your ribs, dip the meatballs, or drench your wings in the original flavor of Grandpa's Barbecue. It isn't too hot or spicy, fruity or smoky or whatever. Grandpa's Barbecue. Available in select stores and online at grandpasbarbecueshop.com.
A as in alligator. L also in alligator. But it's not alligator. It's the Al Travis Show.
We've got AErich Mische on. He is the guy running S.A.V.E, Suicide Awareness Voices in Education. Love having him on. For those who are not watching on YouTube or Facebook, hold those shoes up again. My wife gives me a hard time that, like, I know like 4 colors, blue, red, orange, brown, but I don't have any nuance to it. So let me see if I can. You are holding up 2 very shiny shoes. One I'm going to call turquoise. Just use blue, honey. Turquoise-ish, and the other one pink, light pink.
Pink. So the reason I'm showing you these shoes is that the nonprofit that I used to lead for 11 years has their big gala next week called the Spare Key Groove Gala. Okay. And this year the theme is pastel, the color theme, right? And so they've asked me to come help with their live auction. And so I have to make sure that I'm in theme. Right. So
what's the suit look like with those shoes, though? I mean, your suit don't tell me that's pastel blue too.
Oh yeah. So the suit, there's a pinkish one, and there's this one color-ish, right? And then there's also here, and so in addition to pastel, it's a Kentucky Derby theme. So I also have these hats.
Love the hats. Yes.
You like that?
Oh, I'm a fedora guy. Absolutely, I would not ever wear the pink one. Be honest with you, I like the blue.
Well, and I tell you, I'm partial to pink, but you'd have one of those with a scar, though, wouldn't you?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, no, my wife will hate me for saying, I probably have 25 fedoras of all different sizes, colors, and looks. I'm going blue. My vote is in there. You want to vote, go to S.A.V.E.org and check it out. What have you been working on other than this? Because that even in your regular day job anymore. That's your old day job.
Yeah, that's my old day job. So, we're still working on, as you said, we're continuing to focus on the Washington Avenue Bridge. We've got legislation that's moving through the state legislature. We're working on legislation that would also require that the state of Minnesota, that any new construction or major reconstruction of a public structure integrate enhanced barrier safety or suicide prevention barriers that would apply ultimately to any municipal-owned, city-owned, state-owned public structure.
Sure.
To your point earlier, Al, in this day and age in 2025, we know that these barriers work. So why aren't we just including them in the design at the beginning? Right?
Yeah.
They don't add substantially to the cost. And the reality is if you don't deal with it at the front end, you're going to deal with it in a much more expensive, both economically and human loss cost later. Right? So we're working on that. We're working with legislators on a bipartisan basis on our kids campaign, warning labels, and social media. We've also got another bill that we're supporting that's by Republican House member Kristen Robbins that would make fundamental changes to areas of Section 230, which for those of you who aren't familiar with that, that's a bill that was passed in Congress back in the early mid-90s that essentially allows social media platforms to have absolute 100% not liable for anything, right? And so working with her on that. So a lot of stuff going on the advocacy side in DC. I had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with the staff of Senator Katie Britt's office. Katie Britt is a Republican U.S. Senator from Alabama. Next week, I speak to her counterpart, John Fetterman's staff, Democrat from Pennsylvania, about a bill that they're working on that would help protect kids while they're online. So a lot of stuff going on in the advocacy space. I want to kind of wrap up the conversation today about talking about something that we call the social determinants of health and why that's important as we talk about suicide prevention. A lot of what we talk about when it comes to suicide prevention in the past has been about assuming that anybody who thinks about suicide or dies by suicide is mentally ill. And while there's truth that people who are mentally ill will die by suicide, not everybody who dies by suicide is mentally ill. We have people who have suicidal ideation and suicide because they're struggling financially, because they may be struggling with some kind of underlying health condition, right? So when we think about social determinants of health, they're the things that each of us deal with when we think about what is our life like, right? Things like access to education, access to healthcare. What does our community look like around us? How are we connected on a social basis, and where are we at financially and economically, right? We've talked a lot about in the past this concept of loneliness in the country, right? That despite how connected we may be to social media, that all of us are feeling more lonely, we're more isolated. Those kind of feelings contribute to how we think about suicide and suicidal ideation. So does this idea of hopelessness, right? And you and I are both guys who believe strongly in the American dream. We believe strongly in economic opportunity for everybody. And the reality is that those that are struggling economically, right, whether they live in an urban center, in a rural community, where you're at economically and financially has an impact about how you think about the future, right?
Oh, sure.
That if you don't have a job, right, or you live in a neighborhood where crime and violence is very high, you might live in a household where there's a lot of violence, those kind of things all contribute significantly to individuals' perceptions of what the value of their life is.
Sure.
And so as we talk about suicide and suicide prevention, it's always important. Go ahead.
I just have 1 minute. I'm just trying to give you the 1 minute
I'm going to wrap up. As we think about it, we think about it in the context of it's complex and there's a lot of factors involved in it. And so next time we come on the show, we'll talk about it a little bit more. But in the meantime, look at that sign, 988. Call, text, bet.
988, if this makes you feel weird in any way, give it a call, give it a text. The other thing is if this hits you that, you agree with me, the more you know, the better. I talk about, the Resuscita Annies back in our day to learn how to give, people with heart attacks help. Go to S.A.V.E., take a look around. They have actual programs you can do and follow in classes, and you might find out you can learn a lot. And I appreciate you being here, my friend, Mr. Mische. Always a pleasure. We'll do it again next month. Fair enough?
Thanks, Al.
AErich Mische, S.A.V.E.org. Check them out today. Again, 988, text it, call it if you're feeling weird in any way and you just need somebody to talk to. They're there. Back after this.
If you could save a life, would it be worth 60 minutes?